All right, MuscularDevelopment.com's coverage of the 2015 IFBB professional bodybuilding season is going to wrap up basically with this video. And we've had a real marathon track this year. We've covered this contest season every step of the way. And now we're going to put a bow on it by giving a rundown of the biggest stories of 2015 in the world of professional bodybuilding. And Peter, I'm going to go to you first because you've covered more of these than all of us. Before we kind of get into some of these stories, and it took us a while to break down this list, but before we get into some of these stories, what are some of the takeaways from 2015? Because, man, it seems like there was more stories, more storylines in 2015 than I can remember in a very long time.
Well, good for you. I can't remember a bloody thing. I can't remember yesterday. No, I think there's two main stories kick up in my eyes. One positive, one not so positive. I think it was a great year for young guys coming through. Cody Montgomery, Justin Compton. I know he didn't really come through this year, and Dallas McCarver winning his. But these are guys in their 20s, and they're now professionals. So this is different. The other negative story would be the inordinate amount of space given to the Greene not doing the Olympia. That just went on and on and on. I don't think it added anything to anybody, and we never learned anything in the end.
Well, what we did learn, as you mentioned, is there is a youth movement in the world of IFBB pro bodybuilding, and starting with the gentleman you just mentioned, Cody Montgomery, at 20 years old, wins the overall title at the USA's. And David, turned out to be one of the biggest stories of the year because about 2 weeks shy of his 21st birthday, he won arguably the most prestigious title in the world of amateur bodybuilding, and it looks like he's got himself a real bright future.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been seeing kind of very regularly on the national scene for the last 3 to 5 years is guys that are older winning. It's taken these guys into their mid, sometimes late 30s to earn a pro card. So to see a kid at 20 years old, walk away with not only his pro card, but an overall win at a show as prestigious at the USA's, that was impressive. And Cody being a 3-time teen national champ and a collegiate national champ, for as good as everybody knew that Cody was, I don't think they expected him to jump into the national level scene in the fashion he did. Even some of the wrap-ups that we did of him as a teenager and as his collegiates, I said, this kid is somebody who's got all the potential in the world, but it's going to take him some time to grow into a physique that's going to be competitive at a national level. And to my surprise, and it made me very happy to cover it, he proved me and a lot of people wrong. And in just 1 year from winning his 3rd teen title and collegiate title at the same time, he improved by leaps and bounds and good enough to become Mr. USA. And I think if he keeps on that path, he can be a good pro and soon.
Well, we're going to find out what his plans are for 2016 surely. But as you mentioned, a 3-time teenage national champion, a USA overall champion, and now he's got himself a pro card and a spot on our list of biggest stories of the year. Another story that continues to be big is the 212 division and the showdown atop that division between Flex Lewis and Jose Raymond. And that's become one of the, we spend so much time talking about Phil Heath, Greene, Dexter Jackson, but at the end of the day, one of the more compelling rivalries has become that rivalry between Flex and Jose.
Yeah, and to sort of garnish the whole thing, the 212s, it's a much more competitive class than the Open Mr. Olympia. Every year at the Mr. Olympia, we say 20 guys in, it's going to be a dogfight, and then 4 guys show up in shape. 212's different. They all show up in shape. And the conditioning among all of them is tremendous. And, of course, you've got Flex. He's got the better balance, the better shape, the better flow. But then you've got this rugged, rock that is Jose Raymond. Just, when he's in shape, he's so vascular and hard. Flex is the only guy that can probably handle him, but he has to be at his best to do so.
And the greatest part about that division, David, we just finished covering the NPC Nationals in Miami. And one of the really cool things about that event, it used to be where if you'd win the middleweight class, it meant that was the end of the road, right? You'd go on and you'd get yourself another job and you'd pursue different paths. Well, now a middleweight champion of the Nationals can have himself a full pro career thanks to the 212 division.
Yeah, earning your pro card as a lightweight or a middleweight in the NPC used to kind of be the end of the road for those guys. When looking back, we see a lot of smaller guys that turn pro, and they're kind of wishing that they had a 212 class back then. But it is really nice to see. You get a totally different crop of guys every year that jump into the 212s, and you get some surprises. Guys who turn pro as middleweights who you don't really think are going to be able to fill out, and 2 years later they're competitive in the 212. Touching on what Peter said, and something that I think is important about this 212 division with Jose and with Flex, is that on top of them being two great bodybuilders, they're two just genuinely good guys too. I mean, so to see a rivalry or of sorts between two competitive bodybuilders is great, and it's always fun if there's a little bit of a little bit of animosity or a little bit of drama there. But these are two really upstanding guys that represent the sport really well. So to see them, 1 and 2 in the world, from a fan standpoint and from a media standpoint, I think it's pretty good for the IFBB and bodybuilding as a whole.
Well, that division over the last few years has been the start of a great new tradition. Unfortunately, moving on with our list, another big story this year was the end of what was a 35-year tradition, and I'm talking about the Miss Olympia contest, and an event that was held every year up until 2014. But here in 2015, for the first time, a Miss Olympia was not crowned, marking the end of a pretty cool tradition in the world of women's bodybuilding.
Yeah, and I think it's a shame. I mean, obviously the authorities decided that, maybe it was time to sort of shed this from the Olympia weekend. But they had been a mainstay of the Olympia all those years. And, in some ways, okay, maybe the girls got too overdeveloped. I always have a problem with how can you stop human aspirations from being the best you can be. But they allowed that look to come in, and then they didn't want that look. So I feel sorry for the girls. I mean, they had a great contest, the IFBB Wings of Strength World Championships, with $100,000 given by Crystal and a husband, Mr. Wood, Shake, yeah. But yeah, I mean, when you look back to women's bodybuilding, sort of 1983, 84, selling out Madison Square Garden, the Felt Forum, it was more popular than the men, and it was on TV, and Time magazine were there and all this. Those days are long gone, and it's a shame, but with all these new classes, I mean, obviously the women's physique class is supposed to be catering for that vacuum, but I make a prediction for next year and the year out, they'll just get too big in the end anyway.
Well, as you mentioned, Jake and Crystal and the crew over at Wings of Strength will present their Rising Phoenix in an effort to continue that tradition and give those female bodybuilders an opportunity to continue to do what they do. Now, another story on our list. You mentioned some of the up-and-comers, some of the rising stars. Let's get back to Dallas McCarver, 24 years old, one of the real promising stars in the world of professional bodybuilding. He wins his pro debut here in 2015, and it appears that the future for Dallas is incredibly bright.
Dallas was a big question mark on everybody's mind since he won his pro card at the North Americans in 2012. Even for a young guy, 3 years is a lot of time to take off after earning a pro card. And, we all knew Dallas was a big kid, but again, we didn't know what he was going to bring to the competition stage. And for as good as he was when he won his pro debut out in California, he was so much more impressive at the Mr. Olympia. Here's a kid at 24. He's got a good look to him. He's on a huge frame. He's still got a tight waist. And he made gains by leaps and bounds over the last few years and really took what he brought into that show in California, learned from it, and had an amazing Olympia debut where a lot of people thought, he could have been in that top 10.
Well, a lot of fans have been waiting for an infusion of young talent, and Dallas McCarver, with his big year in 2015, not only does he earn a spot on our list of biggest stories of the year, but he gives us a whole lot to think about. So we're looking forward to how that all plays out and get a handle on where he might compete here in 2016. Another big story in 2015, and unfortunately this is on a real sad note, the passing of Beto Abbaspour. Beto, of course, a great bodybuilder. He competed at the 2014 Olympia 212 Showdown, where he actually fared quite well, and then he came down with a very rare disease called vasculitis, and it just took hold of him. And by the time the following year's Olympia had come, he was gone. And a real tragedy, Peter, and he's somebody that I know a lot of the bodybuilding family got to know over the years. Had tremendous respect for him and, of course, his family, and a huge loss, and, of course, one of the bigger stories of the year.
Yeah, very sad, and given the modern social media, we were able to follow it on a daily basis. That today he's a bit better, now he's a bit worse. He's in hospital. We saw the photographs. I mean, obviously the guy had a tremendous build. Beginning of his career, he was fluctuating between the open 212s. Finally found his niche in the 212s. We thought he would be too big to get down there, but he did. Tremendous bodybuilder, had all the body parts. very, very sad. I mean, the whole thing, and I know other people throw other reasons out, but, you know, a bodybuilder can get knocked over as well as anybody else in the street. It doesn't have to be about something else. So very sad for him and his family, and, you know, very sad to watch it all play out.
Yeah, it was really sad. And, you know, Dave, as a bodybuilding community, you know, we all get a chance to spend so much time together in our travels, and you get to know the competitors, and you realize that, you know, these are folks with families and in many cases, you know, kids and moms and brothers and sisters, and you know, we know them for what they do on the stage. And when something like this happens, it really shakes the industry.
Yeah, you know, it's easy to look at these guys as superstars and, you know, the icons of the industry. But as you had said, it may sound cliche, but these are, you know, when they get off the stage, these are just normal guys, friends like the rest of us. You know, some of the guys that you know, you and I and Peter have built good relationships with. We're very close with him, and you know, and to see that sort of thing happen, it's, you know, it's something that brings everybody down a little bit. But, you know, also, you know, if there's any positive takeaway, it's, you know, it's try to, you know, just really value the time that you have with the people that you're close to, and you know, make the time as best as you can, I guess.
Yeah, well said. Well, moving on with our list. A big story took place actually this past March in Columbus, Ohio, and that was when all the fans gathered the day after the Arnold Classic for the annual Arnold Classic Q&A session, where it's a real treat for the fans. They get to gather and hear straight from the Oak himself, and they get to hear some of his great Hollywood stories and his great Muscle Beach stories. And he's one of the best, not just bodybuilders, but one of the best storytellers of all time. And it's a real treat. But every once in a while, somebody will ask a question, like Peter McGuff, and it will generate a line of dialogue that sort of gets people talking in a big way. And when Arnold makes a point, as we learned, it really can make waves. And Arnold spoke up about his concerns about the judging criteria. He actually called out a lot of our IFBB pro judges, had some very pointed criticisms and comments about the way the contest was judged. It was interesting, of course, because Dexter Jackson had won the contest, arguably one of the more aesthetic bodybuilders of our generation. But Arnold had some points about some of the other athletes further down the line, questioning their midsection, questioning the distension. And Peter McGuff, when Arnold speaks, people listened. It was a story that made its way not just around the bodybuilding world, but around the tabloids.
It was indeed. I mean, the prelude to that was, I was at the press conference, I asked him a question that had nothing to do with the judging. It was completely removed from it. But he answered the question in very humorous form, and then went straight into this tirade. And he was looking at me all the time. And I know the reason why, because every time we speak, we have the same conversation. I was like the Pavlov's dog. Oh, and by the way, you know, and obviously was singing Cedric's praises, who finished fourth, and was saying, you know, you want to look at a guy, you want to be like him, you want to be beautiful lines, Steve Reeves, all that stuff. So yeah, it reverberated around the bodybuilding world, but it's something that Arnold's been saying for 20 years, really.
And then you make a great point. It really wasn't that it was news. We've been talking about trying to bring down the distended midsections, trying to get the judges to count those athletes down and show up there with the midsections. But it didn't matter, because when Arnold says something, then it becomes a news story again.
Yeah, you know, I mean, obviously Arnold taking a few shots at the judges and saying that we need to evaluate, you know, who's at that head table. That's going to make some waves. And, you know, there's some people who agree, some people who disagree. And at the end of the day, it's a subjective sport. You know, I agree with Arnold on some standpoints that, you know, I do prefer the aesthetic physique, but for as cliche as it sounds, a lot of bodybuilding is apples and oranges. And I think one of the big things has been that there's been such a precedent set for, we want guys who are completely shredded. And when you get somebody like Cedric who gets on stage and he's in good shape, we do tend to lose sight of the fact that he's, you know, incredibly muscular and aesthetic and has great presentations, because there's somebody standing next to him, in the case of the Arnold, Branch Warren, who's obnoxiously shredded. You can't take your eyes off from a freaky factor, and some people love that. You know, I remember watching bodybuilding when I was younger, and Marcus Rule would come out and the whole crowd would go, "Rule," you know, and I mean, people love the freaks. That's bodybuilding. And so for as much as people want to complain about the aesthetics and things like that, there's always going to be that side of the fan base that likes the freaky people. And, you know, there were some boos when Cedric got fourth at the Arnold, but I would argue that had they said Branch Warren in fourth, there'd have been people throwing chairs and stuff on fire. So I don't think you're ever going to keep the bodybuilding fans completely happy. You know, there definitely is that group of the fan base that says, hey, you know, we want the guys to look like these old school guys with these small waists. And there's still people who want, you know, the freaks, and there's a lot of people who want your Kevin Lavrones and Flex Reelers who dance right down the middle where they're huge guys. And, you know, I don't know. I guess, you know, everybody always kind of wants what they don't have, and right now we're kind of looking for that bodybuilder who's a combination of mass and aesthetics. And I think, you know, Cedric would be the guy if he could show up really shredded. And I think maybe just Cedric being at the Arnold is kind of, you know, what strikes the chord with people.
Well, it's been 35 years since Arnold Schwarzenegger competed at a bodybuilding contest, but here in 2015, he still manages to land on our list of the top 10 biggest, or top however many we're breaking down, biggest stories of 2015. So Arnold, thanks for keeping things interesting. All right, we're going to move on to another story that really set the industry upside down. It was days leading up to the 2015 Mr. Olympia contest, and we were all getting ready, getting our previews ready, getting ready to go to Vegas and cover the event. Fans were excited. We were getting ready to see the showdown of the ages between Phil Heath and Kai Greene. And then all of a sudden, a video was released. And it was a video of Kai Greene sort of leaning up against a chain link fence somewhere in New York in the dark of night. As tears streamed down his face, he looked straight into the camera like I'm doing right now, and he said, for reasons that I can't explain, and I'm paraphrasing, I will not be able to compete at the 2015 Olympia, emphasizing that he would not be allowed to compete. Now, of course, we learned later, Peter, that wasn't quite the case, that there were a few different versions of that story, and we don't need to get into all that now because it's an old story by now. But it was unprecedented because you told me, and I checked with you on this as soon as Kai made his announcement, you told me that you couldn't ever remember an instance where the second best bodybuilder on the planet opted not to compete in the Mr. Olympia contest.
Yeah, I mean, it was a strange situation. It started happening a couple of weeks before, and I think at the beginning we all thought, well, this will resolve itself because the contest is all that's important. And, you know, Kai with the chain fence and the tears and everything and the long monologue, I mean, he's just taken that out of Dorian Yates' playbook. You know, Dorian was always crying on camera and coming out with his big monologue. That's what I thought when I saw the video at first. But my biggest point to get to the center of this whole thing was it was given too much publicity in the end, but why didn't he come out and tell his fans, I'm not going to be in it, when he knew he wasn't going to be in it 10 or 14 days out? There was people traveling to Las Vegas to see him. At least show them some respect and tell them you're not going to be there, or you are going to be there, or you're going to do it for them. He would have been a hero if he'd have come out and said that. And what I don't want to hear is he's the uncrowned Mr. Olympia, because he's lost 3 times to Phil, you know, second place. He hasn't beaten Phil since 2010. To win something, you've got to be in it, you know, and if you're not in it, then you're not the uncrowned Mr. Olympia to me.
And what makes the story even interesting to this day, we've never really gotten clarification on the story. You know, Olympia promoter Robin Shane came out and explained, you know, that side of the story. And but really, when you break it down, we still don't know. Was Kai Greene ever planning to do the 2015 Olympia? Is there more to this? We've heard about the business side, that there was contractual components with his supplement company and Dynamic Muscle, and we've heard all these different scenarios around this story, but we've never really had Kai come forward and give us a sense of clarity. At least at the time that we're shooting this video, we still don't really know, but I think regardless, when it all comes down to it, when Kai Greene, the number 2 bodybuilder on the planet, the guy who has been runner-up at the Olympia the 3 prior years, decides not to do the contest and makes that announcement just a few days before the show, that is undeniably one of the biggest stories of the year.
Yeah, I guess my biggest problem was the fashion in which he did it. You know, all he had to do was come out and say, hey guys, there's some contractual issues with myself and AMI, or there's some issues with supplements, or blah, blah, blah. He could have done it. I mean, that video was, horrendous.
It obviously wasn't a well thought out plan, right?
No, probably about 2 years ago, I think it was around Christmas. I was at my girlfriend at the time's house, and I was forced, more or less, to watch like the first 45 minutes of one of the Twilight movies. And that acting was 10 times better than Kai's fake tears and his "you can't hold me." I mean, it was I'm sorry to the Kai fans, but it was garbage.
Well,
I mean, it was absolute garbage. Why is he on a chain? does he live by the chain link fence? Why is he outside by a chain link fence in the middle of the ghetto? Is that anywhere near he was? No, they drove out there. They put him up against the fence with the sirens in the background and the ghetto in the background for dramatic effect. It was awful. It was literally the worst setup. I mean, whoever's idea that was to make that video, please don't go into directing movies or being in charge of anything, period, because it was just horrendous. He could have gained so much more respect and still got the point across by just saying, hey guys, I can't get into it too much. And even if he didn't want to give details, let's say he doesn't want to give any details to anybody. Hey guys, I can't get into this too much. I'm not going to be at the Olympia this year. I apologize to my fans and this. I'm not going to be able to make it. That was it. It was literally, you want to talk about stories of 2015? The worst acting in the entire world, 2015, Kai Greene, you're the winner.
Well, David Bay is keeping it real, but I will tell you this. While I will agree with you that it was not a well-executed plan, I have no doubt that those were real tears. And I'll be honest with you. I'm going to disagree with you there because I know Kai. Kai is an intensely emotional guy, and it sounded like this was a very complicated journey for him. And I can see that creating the tears that it did. Now, having said that, the way the whole plan was mapped out, I would agree, not a well thought out plan, especially the way it was delivered. But again, I know if Peter had his way, we would never even be talking about this right now. So, want to leave it there?
No, we have to talk about it. I just feel that it was it sort of took the gloss off the Olympia in the run-up because, everybody was looking forward to the rematch. And it just became the whole focus of somebody not doing it rather than, hey, what do you know, Arnold's making a comeback and he is doing it. It seemed to be very negative in many ways, but yeah, it has to be discussed, yeah.
Well, I'll look in the camera just like you did, Kai, and I'm going to talk to you and I'm going to say, we want you back in 2016. The sport is better when you're competing. It is more interesting. You are a tremendous bodybuilder. Get on stage and do the business of bodybuilding, and all that other stuff will work itself out, all the business stuff. But you need to be competing. We want to see you back in 2016, hopefully on that stage in Columbus. All right, now we're going to move on. Another story that made news for all the right reasons, and it's the story of the sensational 45-year-old Dexter Jackson, 8 years removed from winning the 2008 Mr. Olympia title, or 7 years removed from winning the 2008 Mr. Olympia title. Dexter, at 45 years old, finds himself back as the number 2 bodybuilder on the planet, actually taking some first place votes away from Phil Heath in the process. And Peter, the story of Dexter, it defies all reasonable thinking. He showed up there, arguably in the shape of his life. You can make a case that there were better versions of Dexter. A lot of people like to talk about that, but it didn't matter because of this contest, he was runner-up. He's now 46 years old, I think, as we do this video, and he stands perched as the number 2 bodybuilder on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about all-time greats and Hall of Famers, Dexter's got to be up there. He's maybe the most extraordinary bodybuilder ever in longevity and how his pedigree has always been at the top. We've had other guys gone into the 40s and held their own a bit, but to get better, to reinvent yourself as he did this year, coming in heavy, maybe lost a little bit of sharpness, but made himself more competitive, more size against Phil. Competed in more pro contests than anybody else, 73, 24 wins, one behind Ronnie now. A ridiculous amount of those 70, 60 are top 5 finishes. It's absolutely, if you wrote this 15 years ago, you'd have been called an idiot. I was called an idiot anyway 15 years ago, but that especially would have.
And especially when you think back to 15 years ago, we were talking about a bantamweight bodybuilder.
Well, yeah, a bit further back than that, right. But he started off as a bantam. That's the other thing. He started off 135 pounds, and now he's 240 pounds. He's almost grown another bantamweight, and it's all class. It's not just mass for mass shakes. It's all put together, and the lines are there. There's a flow, and then he gets that great separation and density. So his is a physique that. Some of the modern days physique, you can see they've taken a wrong turn. It's all about the size and everything. He isn't. He's still got a classic physique.
All right, which is going to bring us to what most would agree would be our biggest story of 2015. And I thought it was summed up perfectly when I had Olympia head judge Steve Weinberger on our Pro Bodybuilding Worldwide radio show, which of course airs on musculardevelopment.com. And he came on the show and I asked him to summarize Phil Heath at the 2015 Olympia. And I believe his response was something along the lines of, if it had been a horse race, it was Phil by a nose.
Yeah, I agree. I actually had Sean Roden winning after Friday night. Some people who thought I was a little bit crazy for that. But, you know, Phil in the past few years has come out notably better Saturday than he has on Friday. But this year on Friday when he came out, that pop, that fullness that we normally see from Phil just wasn't there. Now, there was an expectation that he was still going to come back better on Saturday, but I mean, he was notably off on Friday, and he really left that door open for a couple other guys. I think you would have gotten a pretty big applause from the audience had Dexter walked away Mr. Olympia, and I don't think anybody would have been able to complain about it too much.
Well, I don't know if you would have complained about it, Peter, but I think you would agree that it not only was one of the more surprising developments, especially when you consider that once Kai Greene, the guy that most feel would be his chief rival, Kai Greene is the guy who would be most equipped to cause trouble for a guy like Phil Heath. Once we heard he wasn't in the show, it seemed like a foregone conclusion that Phil Heath was just going to show up, pick up a trophy, and hop in his limo, head back to the airport, and fly home to Colorado. But as it turns out, Kai not being in the contest really had no impact on how much Phil Heath had to sweat to finish this deal.
Yeah, I mean, this last 3 years, Phil, you know, David alluded to it, you know, we should start calling him Mr. Saturday Night, because he comes in on Friday and you think, oh dear, something could go wrong here, and then Saturday sews it all up. And that's what happened again, you know, it's like, then bang, everything's tightened up on Saturday night. But with the Kai Greene situation, there was maybe an opportunity, a better opportunity to take the title this year than any other year. And there's sort of a precedent for this. In 2001, Jay Cutler should have beaten Ronnie, but didn't. Then there was all sorts of stuff went off with him and Wayne DeMille. He decided not to do the Olympia the next year. And Ronnie comes in, and Levrone nearly beat him, and Jay could have beaten him. So there was an Olympia gone there. So, you know, we debated Kai before, you know, we thought it wrong on this level. It was wrong on that level as well. He could be Mr. Olympia.
Well, you know, with this whole Phil Kai thing, now the question is, will Phil and Kai ever compete against each other? Because there's now rumors that Kai is going to go the way of the Arnold this year, and maybe we don't see him on the Olympia stage again. Maybe that's just a decision that Kai and his camp have made where they're going to just do the Arnolds. Maybe they will do the Olympia. But as we move further into 2016, that's really a storyline that a lot of us are going to be keeping track of. How is Kai going to sort of strategize his career going forward?
You know, for as critical as I was of that video, I would, you know, like to make it utterly clear that I think Kai is a great competitor. And he's a guy who works really hard in the gym. He busts his butt, and he brings a freaky, you know, package to the stage. And I think I speak for everybody when I say we want to see him on stage against Phil, and I think you will. I think Kai wants to kind of reestablish himself, get another head of steam by going in and doing the Arnold. I think Kai is, you know, he's in tune enough with the fans to know that people were, you know, a little salty by not seeing him on the Olympia stage. People didn't want to wait another full year to see Kai Greene. It's a good opportunity for him to get a win and put a big paycheck in his pocket. But I would be very, very surprised if we didn't see Kai Greene back on stage at the Olympia next year. And, you know, he's one of these guys where he is getting a little bit older, but you really haven't seen any signs of that. You know, there's no deterioration of his leg mass, no imbalances, no anything. So Kai's physique looks like it's holding up really well for aging, and I think he can definitely push Phil for a number one spot again next year. And Phil's going to have to take that into consideration and really, you know, and we said this last year, you know, Phil's got to be on his A game next year. I mean, but you know, I got to reiterate that point that. You know, a couple people had written Kai Greene off as saying, you know, his window to win Mr. Olympia is gone. I don't necessarily think it is. I think if Kai puts the pedal to the floor through 2016, I think he could definitely push Phil.
Well, here's where the doubt comes into play. The calendar is about to turn to 2016, Peter. Kai Greene is now an over 40 bodybuilder who hasn't competed since 2014.
That's correct. And his last two contests, if you look at them, was supposed to be the Olympia, which he didn't do, and the Prague show the year before, where he pulled out after the prejudging, where he was pretty well off. Now I've heard whispers that as of this point, he's not going to do the Olympia. And that's totally wrong. If you want to be the best bodybuilder in the world, you've got to get on that Olympia stage. With all due respect, nobody remembers who won the 2000 Arnold. Everybody remembers who won the 2000 Mr. Olympia. That's the contest. It elevates itself so much above anything else. So I think that's a bad career decision, a bad business decision, if that is so. Maybe he's rethought it, but I heard very strong whispers to that effect in the last week or so.
Well, Phil Heath's close call settles in on our list as the biggest bodybuilding story of 2015. Just kind of wrapping this thing up, you mentioned big money earlier, and it got me thinking that, of course, not only did Phil pick up $400,000 for winning the Olympia, but the IFBB Pro League set a record this year by handing out $3.2 million in prize money over the course of the calendar year, which is also another record. So also record attendance and participation at the amateur level with the NPC. So just all around, just a really positive year in the world of bodybuilding at both the amateur and the professional level.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's been buzz on the boards for bodybuilding's dying, bodybuilding's dying. Hey, look, I attended all the national level shows last year, and I can say, and this year, and I can tell you, that's baloney. Are the numbers in men's physique and bikini climbing? Sure they are. Is that watering down bodybuilding? Absolutely not. Last year here at Nationals, we had a super stacked, super heavyweight class, you know, at the USA's this year. I mean, you know, bodybuilding is in a good spot right now. Are things changing? Yes. But, you know, as you said, more prize money, record numbers. You're getting people out that are seeing, you know, the quality of the level at the amateur level, and it's inspiring them to be better. I mean, I think things are going to move forward into 2016 and be bigger and better. But 2015, I would say all around a pretty solid year for bodybuilding.
I would agree, and I'll go to you, and I'll get a final thought for you on the year. My final thought is a story that really didn't make our list of big stories, but it kind of got me thinking. I feel like the one guy that just didn't take that step forward in 2015 is Dennis Wolf. When you think back to 2014, he had that broke through, finally had that big Arnold win. It looked like he had found the formula. Coming into this year, it seemed like this would have been the year that Dennis Wolf was going to kind of solidify himself as maybe one of the top 2 or 3 in the world. It didn't work out for him. It almost felt like a bit of a lost year for Dennis Wolf.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it last year, because he spent the whole year preparing. He didn't do any early season shows. He's only done that once in his pro career that's 10 years old now. And he looked as if he'd overdone it. He looked depleted. He looked like he'd, you know, that most muscular just wasn't there in the contours and size and density and muscles fighting for space on his shoulders. He seemed to be drained. So I don't know whether the long run-in, you know, wasn't to his best needs. He's a great guy, great bodybuilder. He's spectacular, and it was disappointing to see him not have the crescendo at the end of the year.
Well, that's going to wrap it up. What a great year it was. And one more.
Yeah, I just want to alert everybody that as from next year, I'm starting my own federation. So it's how we live. Let's get on board.
All right, well, there it is. I can't think of a more awkward way to wrap this thing up. But for Peter McGuff and David Bay, I'm Dan Solomon. And thanks for tuning in all year long here at musculardevelopment.com, as we've done our best to send our troops out to really every weekend. Somebody is in some city around the world and covering all these contests. And I know you've logged a lot of miles, as have you, Peter. And I've hung out whenever I was able to get there. And it's been a real thrill. And thanks to everyone over at Team MD for making it all possible. Once again, for Peter McGuff and David Bay, I'm Dan Solomon for musculardevelopment.com.